When it comes to Russian Half-Life mods, you're either going to get something really good or something hilarious. Paranoia comes to mind in the very good category. And one other mod that I hadn't been aware of is Surviving Catacombs, a gothic survival horror sort of story. One that takes itself a little more seriously than They Hunger, but has some similar aspects when it comes to gameplay. The reason I'm bringing this up is because there is a mod of a mod by the same guy who did the They Hunger Relit mod. Surviving Catacombs Relit takes Surviving Catacombs and gives it a modern makeover, without losing sight of what made the Goldsrc mod so great. It really spruces up the game. It polishes up aspects of the weapons, the enemies, other details, and combined with the personal add-on made by the creator, it gives it this really unique and authentic survival horror feeling. It takes me back to the days of Half-Life's horror elements and how much fun they were. Sometimes engine limits can be a good thing, and I think Goldsrc's limits actually add to its charm quite a lot. So let's talk about the story. Surviving Catacombs Relit is a 2-episode mod set in a European country of some kind. You play as 2 researchers that are deciphering the Book of the Dead when all goes wrong. Spirits and undead are unleashed from the catacombs around Castle Poltergeist, leading to them attacking the town and other nearby settlements. And meanwhile, a cult has risen up to help these spirits conquer and terrorize mankind. The 2 researchers, one for each episode, work to try to put the genie back in the bottle, so to speak, cooperating with local law enforcement and any surviving researchers they can come across in their adventures. And this leads to you coming across a variety of weapons and a variety of equipment that you'll have to make use of. Exploring environments from abandoned mines to catacombs, of course, to cityscapes, to some interesting valleys and mountain passes. It's unique, and the settings feel real diverse. You don't feel like you're just rehashing aspects of an existing level, and this also leads to a unique variety of encounters. Across long distances, up close, when changing environments, it's real neat. The biggest highlight, I would say, is how Relit enhances the survival horror aspects of Surviving Catacombs. Similar to They Hunger Relit, there's a weapon carrying penalty that your character has. The amount of weapons you have will slow you down, with having only like 1 or 3 making you run the fastest. From 4 onward, you're gonna start slogging a bit, especially depending on the weapon you carry. The bazooka in particular will really slow you down. So the more guns you carry, the slower you get, which makes a huge difference in a mod where a lot of enemies use melee attacks, and where even things like the humble head crab can be an aggressive, ruthless enemy. You're sort of forced to pick and choose what you want to carry, and I often found that I would discard a gun once I'd run out of ammo for it. Ammo doesn't weigh anything, thankfully. So you can carry as much Tommy gun or shotgun ammo as you want, and then just toss them aside when you're done with them. It does lead to some interesting strategic choices, and there were times when I shorthanded myself without thinking by tossing the gun aside, and then later on coming across ammo that I could have used for it. The enemies are also really interesting, because at first they are just kind of your typical Half-Life horror mod enemies. So you've got like skeletal zombies and undead researchers and civilians, but as time goes on they get more interesting and creative. You've got these fleshy looking head crab variants, including like fast head crabs and poison head crabs within this setting, which really change up how you're going to approach them, especially because head crabs do a decent amount of damage in this. There are also the cultist enemies, who are built off the HECU. Their weapon variety is pretty neat, and I like how crude it is compared to the HECU's modern equipment. This game is set sometime in the 50s or the 60s, and the weapons reflect this, so a lot of World War II era stuff comes up, along with guns from even earlier. So you'll find like the MP-18, a sawed-off double-barreled shotgun, a flare gun, a Tommy gun with a drum magazine, a Luger, and a bunch of other things. They're fun to use, and they have a lot of punch to them. It's also cool when you see them in enemy hands, because they produce these smoke clouds, as if it's an older movie and they're using smoked gunpowder or whatever it is. It adds to the antiquated feeling of the cult, especially when they're in their brown robes, though the ones with the Plague Doctor masks and suits are really cool. Of course, Vortigaunts appear, though their lightning's red and they're sort of transparent. The alien controllers are reworked to this really cool and spooky looking wraith-like enemy that flies around and throws explosive energy blasts at you. There's also a few bosses, including an optional boss fight that I threw myself at repeatedly, only to fail each time. The first and second episodes both end with climactic boss battles. The first one against a gigantic Nihilant-like enemy, and the other against a powerful cult leader. And they're pretty cool, I gotta say. The first one is a rework of the Nihilant boss, but the second felt really original. It had different phases, the cult leader had these unique energy attacks, he could resurrect enemies. It kept me on my toes. It was very, very hard, admittedly. I had to restart and save scum to get through it, but it really pushed me, and it felt really fun to get through. The combat is entertaining. Melee-oriented enemies hit a lot harder, and they aren't as slow on the draw, especially the zombies and the head crabs, meaning that oftentimes you're going to need to be careful. You can't just grab a melee weapon and go into the fray, swinging around. That's a good way to get killed unless you time things just right, like ducking in to stab an enemy, retreating, waiting for him to swing his claws at you, then going in for another attack. And this also extends to some of the alternate fire options for weapons. Like the Gewehr 43 has a somewhat weak alternate fire where you slam the butt of it against an enemy, but on the upside, it knocks enemies back, so you can use that to strategize, or if you're out of ammo, to basically work as your melee option until you can scavenge some more, or to knock an enemy back when they're in melee range. Episode 2 actually handles this in an interesting way, because for the first couple of chapters, you don't even get a melee weapon. You do get some guns, but it puts you in an interesting situation because you have to really watch your ammo, and you have to account for reloads and everything else when fighting enemies. It's trickier than you'd think. You're oftentimes up against a multitude of enemies, and you have to choose when to shoot, when to run, when to conserve ammo. You can't just rely on infinite use of melee weapon to take them all down. It's cool and it adds to the tension. There's a lot about this mod that works well when building tension, adding to its atmosphere. I like how it goes from this spooky castle setting, which is perfect for a gothic sort of horror mod like this, to like the outskirts of town, into this fairly industrial town, and then back to the castle in the first episode. And the second episode offers some more locations, including an abandoned mine and a church. It all flows well together nicely. The settings are really interesting too. The music is actually pretty cool. Also, I didn't expect there to be an in-depth soundtrack, but there are some what sound like unique songs made for it. And they fit well with the different combat or atmospheric situations they're put in. I couldn't follow along with the dialogue in the story, at least the spoken dialogue, since it is a Russian mod. But fortunately, the text at the beginning of each chapter, when either protagonist narrates, that aspect has been translated. Same goes for the opening and closing messages, so you can get the basic gist of what's going on, and any crucial plot-related dialogue gets translated to subtitles. So to some degree, you can follow the aspects of it. I guess dubbing a mod like this would have probably been a lot of work. Would have been nice, but I mean, the Relit mod already does a ton. And on that note, the personal add-on for the Relit mod takes things even further with a unique heads-up display, enhanced weapon models so they look more different than the Day of Defeat equivalents, and they lend themselves better to the setting and to the Goldsrc aesthetics. There's also a mod that gives it a custom menu background, which is a nice touch. Everything goes a long way to making surviving Catacombs Relit feel like a fresh take on the Half-Life experience. Sure, there's your regular shooting zombies and solving puzzles and all that, but the survival horror elements add a lot of charm to it. And when it gets janky, it's the fun kind of jank. So I don't mind that sort of stuff. Some of the problems with the mod are both within and outside of the Relit creator's control. I'd say part of it is that there's a very counterintuitive puzzle involving a monorail about a third of the way through the first episode. Because it's not, you're supposed to scale these barrels to get onto a crashed monorail and walk across the wire to the other side. But the initial area of the barrels is sort of blocked off. You have to go around the barrels to climb up it properly. And even then, you basically are going to have to save scum that jump onto the wires because of how little room you have. That one really frustrated me, I gotta admit. I also encountered some issues with the meat factory level. The endless enemies that spawn when you're escaping with the walker. That led me to completely misinterpret how to get through the level. It would have been nicer if there was a more direct way to indicate what you do, because you can softlock yourself if you shoot down this concrete before you're supposed to. I'd also say that there are some balancing issues with the endings to the first and second episodes. The first episode has a section where you're at the top of Castle Poltergeist and you're fighting off enemies. You're given a sniping perch and a chance to take out a bunch of them. But the mod doesn't inform you that you can ignore a lot of them. You're supposed to take out the spirits, the alien controllers, so the final boss will appear. Now, I get that the other enemies are just distractions. They're meant to get in your way and cause issues when you're fighting the final boss. But you can waste a lot of time up there when you should be just taking out the spirits and getting down for the final fight. As I said before, the second episode's final boss is just too much. It's an awesome fight, with great enemy mechanics and some cool, unique enemies that don't appear anywhere else, but it's a real beast of a fight. Even when you have Walker with you, even when you're fully loaded with medkits and ammo, he just absorbs too many hits, and doesn't help that he can resurrect his followers when needed. Especially when reinforcements are called in, especially the zombified police characters, because they have revolvers that can take you down real quickly. It's tricky, because you want the final fight to be challenging, but you don't want it to be so tough that it just discourages you. I'm sure a balance of some sort could be achieved there. The biggest problem is outside of the Relit creator's control, unfortunately. And that is that the second episode ends on a sort of cliffhanger. The events of the episode are resolved, but it ends on the idea of the two protagonists and Walker teaming up to bring down the cult and destroy the Book of the Dead and send the spirits back once and for all. But there's no third episode. This is never followed up on. The game eventually ends on a promise of things to come, but nothing came from there after that. And again, that's not on the creator of Relit, because if the original Russian creator didn't make a third episode, then you can't really do anything about it. Aside from making a third episode yourself, and even then, that would be a massive undertaking, especially if you don't know what the guy had planned for the story. It would be a ton to ask of a mod that already did a lot for another creation. It's just unfortunate that we never got to see what the original creator had in mind for episode 3. Would have been cool, and it would have provided some closure. But it is what it is. Surviving Catacombs Relit is a good experience. Both episodes are great. They have fun settings that keep you on your toes. I enjoyed the train fight in episode 2, as tough as that was. Same with the canyons in episode 1. Both of those were my highlights, although there were a lot of other fun moments in the mod. I'd recommend giving it a shot. If you're in the mood for some classic Half-Life action with survival horror elements and a touch of gothic atmosphere, then it's the right call. Shout out to the creator of Relit and to the creator of Surviving Catacombs. You guys might not have worked together directly, but your efforts came together to create a really cool experience. One that I had a blast playing through. Thank you all for watching. Take care.